Thank you for tuning in to Jamie TV. Today I'd like to show you my 8-string bass guitar. It started its life out as a vintage V90 4-string bass and has recently been converted to an 8-string by none other than Trevor Wilkinson, especially for me. And it is in fact one of a kind. Talking to this chap called Trevor Wilkinson. For anyone who doesn't know who Trevor is, he's like the Gandalf of basses and guitars. He's one of the world's leading guitar gurus, and so I'm chatting to him, and I'm telling him on one hand that I now only play vintage basses and guitars and fretking basses and guitars. He designs both. He designs for both companies, and I endorse both companies. So I'm telling him that they're the only instruments I play now. I don't own anything else. But on the other hand, I'm telling him that I've always wanted an 8-string bass, and I'm fishing because, well, basically, neither company makes one. So I'm like, you know, I don't want to play any instrument made by any other company. I want to keep supporting you guys, but I want an 8-string bass. And I just saw this little light go on, and he got excited about the idea. So Trevor and I were stood by a display of vintage basses, and so we had a look through, and Trevor picked out the Vintage V90 as being the ideal bass to convert into an 8-string. Something to do with the pickups being ideal for the conversion. I don't know. I mean, the guy knows what he's on about. I'm not going to question him. So I said, well, I've got one of those. So he said, okay, well, send it me and we'll see what we can do. And here we are. So let's have a little closer look at the fantastic work that Trevor's done on this bass to convert it into an 8-string. First of all, he's removed the 4 tuners that were on the headstock of this bass because they were quite large and didn't leave enough room for the extra set of tuners that needed to fit on the headstock. So what we now have is 4 guitar tuners for the thinner strings, and 4 smaller bass tuners. One of the tuners is slightly obscuring the writing on the headstock, but I'm not bothered about that. He's fashioned a special nut to house the 8 strings, and actually some people might not know what you actually get on an 8-string bass guitar is the first string here is, if you were striking downwards on the E string, is an octave higher than the low E, and that's the same all the way across the bass. So you get an octave higher E than the E that you would typically get on a 4-string bass guitar, an octave above A, then the normal A string, etc., etc. So the 4 thinner strings are actually the same as the 4 strings that you would get, the 4 bottom strings you would get on an electric guitar. And then this is the most fabulous thing about the conversion to me, is this bridge. Trevor's fashioned this fabulous bridge which I can accurately set the intonation for all 8 strings, and it houses the 4 bass strings in the back of the bridge here, and then the 4 guitar type strings go through the body here. Should have made a demo video of the V90 bass before sending it away to Trevor. The V90 has a really playable, nice satin finish fast neck, great tuning stability, 24 frets, and great cutaways, nice deep cutaways to allow excellent access to the upper frets. But the really exciting thing about the V90 is, particularly at the price point, is that these 2 humbuckers, or what appear to be humbuckers, come with a varicoil connected, so you can wind off one side of the pickup, taking the humbucker down to a single coil sound, or any variation somewhere in between the 2. So with 2 pickups like that, and the varicoil and the balancing you can do with the volumes, you can get an amazing amount of different sounds out of the bass, which for a bass that's well under £300 I think is pretty exceptional. I've been fascinated with the sound of the 8-string bass guitar since I started listening to an amazing band called King's X when I was a teenager, and I've wanted to get one of my own ever since, but you know, I've looked into it many times and it just seemed that it was going to be a really expensive purchase, and it's not the most practical bass to buy, I guess. I mean, it's a bass that most people wouldn't use on that many songs. But you know, I've always thought what a great creative tool it would be to have, and so this is a bit of a dream come true for me, so thank you very much, Trevor. As you'll hear in the sound clips in this video, I'm still kind of a novice to playing the 8-string. I've only had it a few days, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of what it sounds like, because I just think it's fabulous and I want to share it. But here's what I've learned about it so far. The main styles that someone would play a bass guitar with would be finger style, or with a pick, tapping maybe, and slapping. Now, just taking a quick look at each of those styles. When you play a finger style, what's happening is, because you're sort of fingering upwards, the first string that you hit is actually the bass string, and because the bass string is much thicker than the guitar string above it, if you like, predominantly you're hitting and hearing the bass string. So when you play fingerstyle, you tend to get less of the octave string. So the effect of the 8-string is a little subtler, to my ears anyway. When you play with a pick, which seems to be how most people play 8-string, you get a much brighter sound, because you're striking, predominantly striking down, you're hitting the thinner string first, and therefore you're really getting that octave sound, that higher octave sound, very prominently. But as you strike with the pick, because that bass string underneath is thicker, you're always hitting that one too. So to be honest, the most effective way to get the full octave sound from the 8 string is to play with a pick. That does seem to be the way that most people play it. I've seen that people who are normally fingerstyle players, when they pick up the 8 string, will use a pick. As far as tapping goes, again, because of that thicker bass string, when you tap down, if you don't tap down so hard, you're predominantly hearing the bass string. So if you want to play tapping on the 8 string and you really want to hear that octave effect, you've really got to tap down hard. I mean, I tap down pretty hard anyway, because you know I'm a product of the hair metal 80s, so I've been tapping for a long time. But you've really got to give it some stick with the right hand. And now slapping, which is not so much one of my well, it's not my my best style, but I do some slapping. I've found it's a little tricky. It takes a lot of accuracy with the thumb, but it can be done. And when you hit it with the thumb, because the thumb really does tend to go down with some welly when I play, I'm hearing that octave sound. I'm hearing both strings clearly whenever I hit it with the thumb. But when you're playing pull-offs or snaps or whatever you want to call them, again, you're getting the thicker string first, so it tends to sound that little bit more bassy. You're hearing less of that octave string. But I like to play these days, I like to try and play a style that's sort of a combination and a blend of all. So it's quite nice how it kind of gives very different it gives a very different sound as you swap between the styles. It's a shame that there isn't a company like Vintage making an affordable yet solid, decent quality 8-string bass that you can buy off the peg. But you never know. If enough bass players make a fuss about it, email in Vintage. We'll see. Take care. See you later.